It's 7 o'clock. I think we'll start now. Good evening, viewers. Welcome to this special session of the Hyderabad Literary Festival. We're calling it special because this is a special session on Muse India Translation Awards. Muse India has a great relationship with HLF because our colleague Jayasree Rao from Muse India and Vijay Kumar were the ones who actually started the Hyderabad Literary Festival way back in 2010. So we are very excited to have this session. Before I introduce the speakers of today, I'd also like to remind you that our regular June session will be on 14th June. And this is Ramona Sen, the author of The Lady on the Horse and Other Secrets, who will be in conversation with Sushmita Banerjee. That's again on Friday, June 14th at 7 p.m. Please tune in again. Now, in this session, we have quite a few panelists, as you can see. So I'm going to be brief about the introduction so that I don't take away the entire session from the panelists. First of all, I will introduce the winner of the Muse India Translation Award 2023, Madhu Sriwastav. She got this award from Muse India for post box number 203, Nala Sopara, from Hindi to English. She is an assistant professor of English at Bamanpukur Humayun Kabir Mahavidyalaya, affiliated to West Bengal State University. Her interest areas are women's writings, gender studies, and translation. She is currently pursuing her PhD in feminist utopia. Then we have 3 jury recommendations. One is Dr. Jayasree Kalathil. She got it for Valli, from Malayalam to English. She is a writer-translator of Indian origin based in the UK. She is also the author of Sackcloth Man. It's a children's book that has been translated into Malayalam, Telugu, and Hindi. She has won several awards for translation. Our second jury recommendation is Dr. Priyamvada Ramkumar for Stories of the True, Tamil to English. This was well received and had a reprint in December 2022. She was awarded prizes for translation along with along with Sukrita Ramchandran, a fellow translator. She founded Mori, an initiative that brings together literature from different languages and provides a platform for critical discourse. Then we have Alladi Uma and M. Sridhar for Telugu, the best stories of our times. Professor Alladi Uma currently looks after the Alladi Memorial Trust after voluntary retirement after 25 years of teaching career. Her scholastic contribution includes African American literature, Indian writing in English, translation, and comparative English. Joining her will be Professor M. Sridhar, who also took voluntary retirement after 20 years of teaching again to work for the Alladi Memorial Trust. His work is in the areas of literary criticism and theory, Indian literature in translation, women's writing, translation, and comparative literature. Uma and Sridhar are also recipients of several awards. We have our jury members also joining us here. And first is Professor Sanjukta Dasgupta, who is professor and former head of department, as well as Dean of Faculty of Arts, Calcutta University. She received several fellowships in gender studies and translation. She was a jury member and chairperson of the Commonwealth Writers' Prize UK. She is the author of several publications and received several honors. Second, we have Sukrita Kumar, former fellow of the Indian Institute of Advanced Studies, Shimla, and the recipient of Aruna Asaf Ali Chair at the Delhi University. She has had distinguished invited positions outside India and is a recipient of several honors as well, including Rabindranath Tagore Prize 2023. Has several publications to her credit and currently guest editor of Indian literature. Moderating this entire panel of very distinguished translators is my colleague from the Hyderabad Literary Festival, Professor T. Vijay Kumar. Over to you, Vijay.
Thank you, Kinara, and welcome viewers once again. As my colleague Kinera Murthy has just mentioned, for those of you who are not familiar with Muse India, let me just inform you that Muse India is a pioneering online free access journal devoted to showcasing Indian literature both in English as well as in translation. And it started in 2005 and continues to be one of the leading journals uninterrupted for the last close to 20 years, which is a feat in itself for any literary journal. Hyderabad Literary Festival is an initiative of Muse India, and Hyderabad Literary Festival started in 2010. And we are celebrating 15 years of Hyderabad Literary Festival in 2025. And this evening, we are calling it a special session because this session is all about the Muse India Translation Awards 2023. Now, Muse India, from the beginning, and HLF too, have always had a special role to play in promoting Indian literature in translation. And it is also befitting, therefore, that HLF and Muse India collaborated to bring this session to you this evening. So, as without wasting any further time, because introductions have already been done, let me first congratulate Madhu Sriwastav, the winner of Muse India Translation Award 2023. Congratulations, Madhu Sriwastav.
Thank you.
Yeah, and she won this award for her translation of the Hindi novel. And let me therefore begin with her, and then we will take the conversation forward. Was this your first full-length translation, Madhu?
This was my first book which I had translated, but I had translated short stories before this.
Correct.
And, quite a few were anthologized in 2 different anthologies. I translated poems, Shakespeare's sonnets, and a section of the Mahabharata from, I don't know Sanskrit, so I don't know what kind of translation you'll call it, from Van Guterman's The Mahabharata, the Sabha section, to Hindi.
Okay. So you translate both from Hindi and into Hindi?
I haven't done much into Hindi, but mostly from Hindi and some Bengali into English.
I see. And I know that this novel of the Postbox Number, this novel was the winner of the Sahitya Academy Award in 2018. And was that how that novel came to you, or did you choose to translate this novel?
No, I chose to translate this novel when I was told about this project in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And then I read it, and it really struck me. Right? The first reading itself made an impact.
So it's both your own interest in the novel as well as the opportunity that you got to translate it. Now, I'll come back to you, in a while after I speak to the other panelists. Let me now go to the jury. Now that we have talked about the winner, Sanjukta Di, I just wanted to ask you, you have been on, and you continue to be on so many, juries, panels of, including the Commonwealth Prize, the Jnanpith, and the Sahitya Academy. So when you are in the position of a judge, particularly when it comes to translation, what exactly do you look for in a translation, particularly when you are not familiar with the source language?
Good evening, everyone. And thank you, Vijay. That's a good question, as the Americans say, which means that I have to rack my brains to really find out the way in which I approach a text whose original language I'm not familiar with. Now, in my case, the emphasis is always on the English language, because those are the translations that I arrive at my desk for my work. And so the English language for me becomes very, very important, apart from the content, the handling of the language. That is the linguistic mode used by the translator, whether it seems very, very ethnicized, or whether it is anglicized, or whether it is of a standard English that is can be received easily by those who regularly read English novels and English fiction, and who may not belong to the English department at all. And so the sort of denseness that often we use in terms of our work in the English language departments is something that if you try using it in a translation into English from an Indian language, then sometimes it may become unreadable.
Correct.
So those are the first approach in my case.
So basically,
the language itself.
You are looking for readability in that sense.
That would be my first priority.
Correct. And readability in the target language.
Absolutely.
And do you also look at how, for example, through that English language, you can also have a glimpse at the original language, the source language? I mean, you talked about, for example, whether you nativize it or foreignize it, right? For example, when you read an English text, do you also look for the sound and the tone of the source language?
Yeah, if it happens to be Hindi or Bengali or Assamese or Orissa, the Oriya language, it would be easy for me. But if it is the language of the southern part of my country, then it is, I'm not at all trained in those languages. So apart from just a few words from Tamil, I really wouldn't be able to. Yes, just certain words that I have heard, but I would not be able to read or even understand an entire, say, even a single paragraph of any of these languages of the South, which is really so rich in its literature.
Yeah, I think that naturally takes us to the second member on the jury, Sukrita Paul Kumar. Sukrita, you know both Hindi as well as Urdu, right? And you translated from those two languages also. So, for example, when you were judging this particular book, did you also make a kind of a comparison between the translation and the original? Or you avoided doing that?
Yeah, so I totally avoided that. But the fact of the matter is that I had read the Hindi original. So I was aware of the power of the original there. And what I was looking for is not just readability, but I was also looking at to what extent there is a certain kind of, for me, translation does operate in a liminal space of bilinguality. I am conscious of that, very conscious. And so I wanted also to see the Hindi in that English, right? So I was actually on the lookout for that. And I think I felt good that it didn't become an anglicized novel, you know. Of course, the subject itself is of great interest, so I, as you know, I mean, I have a special interest in that. And I have done a special issue of Indian literature, for instance, on transgender. So, and I know the author very well. So I know the author very well. And so all of that combined, and I was trying not to be prejudiced, because that was a danger, a great danger, because I would veer towards it because of my personal interest, because of...
As well as your familiarity with the text, etc.
Yeah. So I think I was successful in that, particularly after I read all the other novels. Of course, I hate to be in the position of jury or judgment and all that in literature. I don't like it. And but I take it on because I do feel that, I've come onto a stage where I feel that translations by hook or by crook need to be forefronted in our society, and we need to pay more attention to it. And for instance, this session is making us talk about translation and also compare and so on with others. Now, I do not know, and I think Sanjukta and I that way saw eye to eye, on this matter, because both of us are quite excited about the whole idea of translation anyway.
Correct. But I think both of you coming from, two different, should I say, linguistic backgrounds, I think also does a kind of a fine balancing between familiarity with the source text and a complete unfamiliarity with the source text. And therefore, I think it's, the benefit that you get from that kind of balancing. I will now want to, take that to Jayasree. Jayasree, apart from being a full-time writer as well as a translator, you are also a mentor. You do this mentoring of translators. So I really want you to tell us, is translation something that can be taught or that can be trained? Can a translator be trained? So what kind of mentoring do you do when you do these workshops or training sessions or whatever?
Thank you. For me at least, mentoring, and I'm only recently getting into that field. It's not really about teaching anything really in terms of, teaching somebody to be a translator. But I think there are other things that you can look at, because I think any translator is also fundamentally a writer, so people do have a craft, an art, a passion, etc. for language, for playing with language and all of that. In the mentoring relationship, the 2 or 3 things that I really like to look at. One is that, how can you call the person's attention to their craft? Because sometimes we write and we are not enough focused on our own craft. So what are the kind of things that one can do in order to kind of look at it critically, look at it from a distance, look at it closely, etc.? Because passion does tend to, at least for me, override crafts at some points when you are doing the work. The other thing for me is translation for me is a completely political act. And that means that it has ethics that need to go with it. And especially when you translate sitting in the UK as a woman of color who is a migrant, there are a whole range of discussions that come into the idea of English. So I'm not a particular fan of the discussion on domesticization versus foreignization, etc. For me, the interesting things are the OED itself says there are 37 types of Englishes in the world. So I call it Englishes. It's not just one English. What can we do with the language? And every time we translate from one language to the other, what happens to both the languages? And language is a, mutating, changing thing that it works, it grows because human beings are using it. So these are the kind of issues that I like to discuss with mentees as well.
But Jayasree, you mentioned the varieties of English. But for example, those of us who are in India, for example, exposed to, by and large, only one kind of English, right?
I
mean, the kind of formal system, it's the kind of formal English that we are encouraged to consider correct English, right? So the varieties
to an extent,
of English,
perhaps, but I also think that, even looking at the people, so I'll give you one example. One of the questions that I was asked when I finished translating Mustache, the one that won the JCB prize, somebody asked me, why didn't you use Indian English? So for me, the question, I am from Kerala, okay, and I lived in different parts of India before coming here. But I learned my English in Kerala. I don't have a conception of an Indian English. In Kerala, we know two types of English. One is the kind of very formal, colonial throwback English that is still there in government departments or the state documents, etc. The other one is a very Mallu English that, we don't have the English that is used in Delhi, Bombay, Calcutta, which is usually called as Indian English. So the characters in that book, if they spoke Indian English, it is as alien to that book as they might speak African American English. So there is a way, and I think current contemporary people, especially young people who are coming into translation, I find them using language in much more relaxed and loose way. There's American English there, there's British, like that kind of colonial English there, but there's, the openness to all these, YouTube and Netflix and all of that. I think language has become richer because of that. And I know there are some people who look at it saying that language is being spoiled. I mean, even the other day I got into a conversation with somebody who says that language is being, made bad by all of this. But I think it makes it more vibrant. And I think there are more, there's much more of a relaxed, and also probably because there are lots of translators who are translating from outside of English departments and academia. People who are just in the society,
users
readers
of
and
English.
writers who are also getting in.
The users of English rather than the teachers of English. I think that's good for English itself, I think. And that takes me to Priyamvada. Priyamvada, if Jayasree has now recently got into this mentoring, you have been a mentee in that sense. You have undergone, mentorship, by a couple of very, very well-known translators. How much do you think you have benefited from that kind of mentorship?
A lot, without doubt, because first of all, as a budding translator who chose to do a book-length work to start off and didn't go the usual route of doing a story here and there and publishing in magazines. While it's a short story collection, some of the short stories in there are almost the length of novellas. So for me, the first and foremost sort of benefit I got from the mentorship was just validation of what I was doing. And that gave me a whole lot of confidence to go ahead, because often as a translator, you're making choices all the time. And while there's an inner voice that's telling you what to do, sometimes when you step back and look at the text, you start doubting yourself. And there are a million choices in front of you, and you can, kind of get lost in that. So it gave me the ability to trust my instincts and at the same time step back and see what is it that I can do better. That's something that I really learned through these mentorship programs. And I would also say that, it taught me to think more consciously about my translation process. A lot of what we do is very intuitive.
That's what Jayasree was also saying, that a translator has to be conscious about his or her own craft.
Yes. So if you and sometimes when you're doing it intuitively, you don't face a problem when everything's going all right. But there are parts of the text where you reach a sort of a bump, and you don't really know what's happening there, like why you stuck, why you're struggling with a particular portion of the text. So those are the things that I felt that the mentorship programs really helped me reflect on and become more conscious about the craft of translation. And of course,
were these mentorship programs kind of one-on-one, or was it a kind of a group so that you could actually kind of share notes and kind of learn from each other? I mean, what kind of mentorship was this?
So both of the mentorships that I was part of, one was the South Asia Speaks program where Aruna was my mentor, and that was the first cohort that they were running. The other one was with the American Literary Translators Association, ALTA, and Karim, who translates from Arabic. He was my mentor. In both these cases, it was a one-on-one mentorship. So I would actually send my work in advance. They would read it and then come back to me with their thoughts. We had like an hour session discussing that particular chapter and the various things that we could do with it. So it was a fairly intense exercise. But what I understand is of the South Asia Speaks later on, I think the subsequent batches have become more of a group mentoring sort of, or it's almost a workshop format where there is more scope for interaction between the mentees and you also learn from each other.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I would like to, come to Alladi, Uma and Sridhar. Uma and Sridhar are obviously the best known and the most prolific translators from Telugu into English. So, I want either Uma or Sridhar, you choose, but I want to know these stories that you translated, they were, how much of your own choice was there in those? Because these stories were selected by Olga and translated by you, or were you also part of the selection? So, and of course, when you put together an anthology like this, I think the choice becomes so difficult. What to include, what to exclude. So therefore, please tell us, this kind of the process of anthologizing in that sense.
Yeah, thank you, Vijay. And before I move on, let me first congratulate winner Madhu and the other two who have been here, Jayasree and Priyamvada. And also thanks Sanjukta and Sukrita. It's been a long time since I met Sukrita, so it's been very nice of you to get us together here. Actually, credit should go to Volga because HarperCollins approached her to have a collection of short stories of 20 years. Actually, this is probably the first time where we have done something which somebody else has chosen. We have never done anything that we have not ourselves chosen. Even when we did things for Sahitya Academy, they gave us a number of things and we picked up those that we wanted to do.
Right.
But Volga, we've been very good friends with Volga, and one of our first translations was Volga Sayoni. So Volga was in touch with us. She may have picked up the writers, but she also did get back to us and shared some of the stories that she wanted to be included, and that's how the process went. So we cannot say, and I'm sure Sheela will agree, that it's our selection. It is primarily Volga's selection with inputs from us. But if we did not like a writer, or if we did not like a writer, I mean, that's a strong word, but I mean, we did not like the that particular work of the writer.
Correct.
Because as very rightly put by Jayasree, translation is both a creative and a political act, and one has to involve oneself with the text that we translate. And very often it's difficult because we are already two people negotiating to find a text we like together, we want to translate together, feel one with the text and so on. So we were very frank with her that maybe not this, because we wouldn't be able to do justice. It's not what you call it, an automatic translation project, where we have to enter into it. We should either like it very much or dislike it very much, something must come out of it. And that's how we did it. Maybe Sridhar wants to add.
Just to add to what Uma was saying, yes, Volga was asked to put together a collection of short stories, and she was asked to suggest a couple of translators, and she did a couple of suggestions, and they picked up the two of us to do this work. So as Uma said, there definitely the choice was primarily Volga's, but there were inputs from us in the sense of both saying that maybe not this writer, but somebody else, and not perhaps this story, but something else. So since there has been some kind of an ideological affinity between Olga and the two of us, and we have been working with her for a very long time, we have been able to arrive at something where we have it's in some sense it's also a collaborative activity, though primarily she was the
but I was also thinking, was there any occasion where both of you, that is not just the selecting Olga and the two of you, liked a particular story or did not like a particular story, but I mean, what I'm asking is how much freedom you had from the publisher, for example? You had complete freedom. It was completely your choice in terms of
absolute freedom from the publisher. The publisher did not put any condition.
So finally, it was
your choice was completely given to Olga and to us,
and the two of you.
And actually, there were a few other stories, but the size of the book.
Correct.
That's what the only thing that the publisher told us. We may have to remove a few stories because it was getting to be a bit too much. So we did translate a few extra stories there. And talking about freedom, we must say that Sohini Basak, who edited this particular volume, was very understanding in some ways. Because initially, I mean, this brings us back to what is English. I mean, Sanjukta talked about readability and so on. And I feel that readability is something that a reader must make an effort to also, there are many English writers I find difficult to read, but I read them because they are powerful in a certain sense. So initially there's one particular story by Kadir Babu, who is a journalist. So his entire story is very journalistic. And one of the initial responses from Sohini was, let's not have this kind of style, smoothen the style or something. So we were sort of insisting, and then she saw the reason when she looked at that story vis-a-vis the rest of the story. So we did have a lot of freedom of negotiation also.
Yeah, good. I think that, since from general issues we have now come to specifics, I would like to go back to Madhu Sriwastav and ask her, both in terms of content as well as, because, for the benefit of the viewers, let me mention that this is a novel, Chitra Mudgal's novel, where basically this is a novel about a relationship between a mother and a son. And it's a kind of a fraught kind of a relationship because of the son's sexual orientation. And this entire novel is written in the form of letters, epistolary form. So I wanted to ask you, Madhu, either in terms of form or in terms of the content, did you find, as I think Priyamvada mentioned, those kind of bumps where you thought, how do I do this?
Yeah, there were many bumps. First place, because the content was okay. Content was very strong, very attractive, and very emotionally charged. But when I started with the groundwork, it's in the form of letters, like you said, and there is supposedly one person speaking, Vinod, the protagonist, but even in the form of letters, he brings in many characters, and the characters speak here and there, and there are hallucinatory scenes. So at times it is difficult to make out who is speaking, and that I have to convey to the reader in a manner that he or she can make it out very clearly. And like in English, we say, it is he said, she said this way. But in that real text, original text, like Sukrita ma'am will know, there is no mention, like who is speaking.
Who is saying?
At times it is difficult to make out. So those areas, and I had to make it clear to the reader that who is actually speaking. There are scenes where he's just imagining that someone is there, Poonam is there, she's putting a thumb on his back. So those were the difficult areas. And then again, I have a huge glossary in the book. If you have seen the text, you'll know. There were many words from the original text which couldn't be translated. So I had to keep those, and then, the reader shouldn't find it, it shouldn't come as an obstacle that you have to go to the glossary again and again to find out the meaning. So the lucidity had to be maintained, and again, it had the novel is pretty gripping. That speed had to be maintained, and then again, readability should be there. And like we are talking about Englishes, and there are so many the speakers of English from different parts of the country in this novel. So I tried to keep that regional, flavor of English in the text. So I had to negotiate a lot of things, and it was difficult, but at the same time, it was also a pleasure working out.
Yeah, because I think particularly when we are talking about alternative sexualities, the vocabulary itself sometimes, as Jayasree said, it's a kind of a political act.
Yeah.
Translation is a political act. If you continue to use language which, the cisgender is familiar with, to talk about alternative sexualities, we are in a way kind of ironing out those specificities. So did you kind of come across some of those particularly linguistic problems that Sanjukta mentioned in the beginning?
Yeah, those problems also were there, but like you said, that the usual language which we know, and this is the content is so like it's something new. The person who is reading the text will be sensitized or will become aware of many new things. So the language also had to cater to that. So I have tried to make it as simple as possible so that the person can understand. And where I felt that the original has to be there, because it cannot be translated, like one word is there, Thikana, where the transgenders live. It cannot be called a home. It cannot be called a shelter. So I kept that word. I think that's a very political word where they are forced to stay. They have no alternative. So I kept that word. Everywhere I have maintained that. And there are many more words, like we have kinship words over there.
Yeah.
So, and I have used it creatively also, because I have used the word Gujarati word for mother, ba, everywhere. But at some places I have kept mother when he's, showing a distance from his mother, where he's not happy with her. And papa, the term for father, that also I have used it politically when he's saying for the first time that he's not happy with his father. The mother is trying to, say that your father took you to a doctor, to a specialist. We had a checkup. Then he doesn't say, but when he's speaking about his father for the first time, that he declared him dead in front of the world. He staged a drama. Then I have used the word. And if you read the text carefully, it requires an immersive reading. You will understand. It's very clear which word has been used and why. It's a very interesting reading, I feel so. And those who have read can also make it out.
Well, it has won the prize, so obviously it worked. So Jayasree, I want to come to you, about some of the things that you mentioned earlier about translation as a political act and how we need to bring by hook or crook, as you said, translation to the foreground. But do you also think that are there languages in India where translation, languages which are more hospitable to translations and language which are translation resistant? I'm asking these questions with a specific context, but I know I would like you to, respond to that. Are some languages more hospitable to translation than others?
Do you mean in terms of having translations as part of its literature, or language in itself being?
See, I'll tell you the specific example that I have in mind. Once a very well-known Telugu writer said that two languages which are very resistant to translation of other Indian languages into, those languages were, Malayalam and Bangla. That they are quite keen to see their works go into other languages, but they don't, there's a kind of a resistance. So do you think that there are, we always talk about translation as translating culture, right? But do you think that there is also a culture of translation?
There definitely is. And I think Malayalam, if you speak to anyone from my generation who's been interested in reading generally, we have all grown up reading translations into Malayalam in Kerala. And these
From
translations from Indian languages, especially in those days, it was from Odia, Bangla, Marathi, Telugu, Kannada, etc. These are the ones that I remember very clearly. And these were serialized in literary magazines in Malayalam. And then later on came as books as well. A huge amount of translations into Malayalam happen all the time, even today. So I'm not entirely sure as to where the comment of the person came from. So we have grown up reading translations, and also from foreign languages, mostly from Spanish, Russian, and German. And that there's also political connections by certain languages where, as we are Kerala and communist. So translation has never been alien to us. We are constantly reading. We grew up reading translations. And similarly, we have also tried very hard to translate from our language outwards as well. I personally think that there should be more translations between regional languages, not just from one regional language into English or from English to our language, but I think there needs to be more translations between languages. How to facilitate that? I mean, there are some people who are doing that work, but I think I don't know, somehow there needs to be more of that, so that there's that Indian language literature is read by Indians across without the mediation of English is also necessary, I think.
Yeah, I think that is becoming more and more of a kind of a utopia because I think English becomes a kind of an intermediary language between and among Indian languages themselves. But I want to take this question to Priyamvada. Priyamvada, you, I understand this was your first book length translation. And also interestingly, this is the first book length translation of your author, Jeyamohan, right? Again, if you see, do you think there has been a lot of translation of Tamil classics into English rather than contemporary writing? Do you think there is less of contemporary writing available to? Because I think Tamil has that kind of a classical baggage, right? So. Do you think that there is more of that classical hangover rather than more contemporary work coming into?
I think there's certainly a classical hangover as far as sort of the international attention on Tamil literature and translation goes. There is certainly a classical baggage there, as you put it. But to be fair, I think there has been a lot of translations that have come from Tamil into English of contemporary literature as well. And more recently, in fact, the Tamil Nadu Textbook Corporation has taken this initiative of bringing a number of contemporary authors into the English language. There's been a lot that's been done, but my pet peeve is that many of the great authors who come out of modern Tamil literature, I would say, if not contemporary, have really not found the recognition that they should have. And I think it's to do with both. I would say we will have to acknowledge that it's also to do with the quality of the translations that maybe have come out in the past. And at the same time, I think it's also to do with how these books have been marketed, or have they even got the attention that they would have got today, where definitely translations are a lot more prominent. They're finding reviews in leading newspapers. There you see them in shops. While there's still a long way to go. It's a different environment we are in today. And at the time that many of these authors, like even Sura or Ashokamitran, were translated, I think the attention that it received is probably lacking. And I do hope that they are republished and taken to the world a lot more seriously.
Yeah. I think that really takes me to Uma and Sridhar once again, because again, this might be an impression, but I feel that among the languages which don't really get much attention in terms of translation is Telugu. So what do you think is actually lacking in the Telugu literary scene, as it were, that is kind of preventing it from kind of entering into this kind of a national imaginary? Forget about the international imaginary, but even national imaginary. Whenever we talk about translation, you can easily think of 4 or 5 languages that come to everybody's mind, and rarely does Telugu figure there. So what do you think is actually lacking in the Telugu literary scene? Yeah, you are on mute, Sridhar.
It's very, very difficult for us to really answer that question, because we have a similar question to ask publishers who don't seem to take note of what is happening in Telugu writing. But from whatever we can see, from what the kind of translations that we see, we often wonder as to why Telugu translation has never come to be among the JCB list or any big translation prize. So I mean, I think there's a lot that needs to be said about how the publishers view these languages. I mean, I'm sure that there has been a kind of a hierarchy of languages, and we must accept that hierarchy of languages has been there and is promoted quite actively by publishers. And I would put it to that as the reason.
Yeah,
maybe Uma has something more.
I think that we should stop being apologetic about Telugu not reaching out. I think that is one of the things that we, and as somebody like you who has done a lot of important texts into Telugu also, has done it. I think there is a need for us to inform people that a lot is going on in Telugu, and I don't think we have to advocate it so much as to publish things. And my feeling is that what should I strong opinion is that once we have texts that get into the market and are seen as important, I'll give you one such example, and I feel very awkward because it's been translated by Sridhar and me, and I'm mentioning that particular text, is as to why Delhi University for a very long time prescribed untouchable spring for their undergraduate reach to the national level universities. I'm sure that and Kanya Shulkam, for example, people talk a lot about Kanya Shulkam, the various translations of Kanya Shulkam that you have done, Belched, Naradrao and others. And so I am of the firm opinion that texts will speak for themselves. And maybe we started a little late. If translation is a political activity, hegemony has to be broken. And I firmly believe that hegemony of Indian languages will be broken. Like we say, the hegemony of English or what we call British English or standardized English is being broken in a certain sense.
Yeah, I think that, that really takes me to Sukrita and Sanjukta both, because in a way they are associated with institutions, Sahitya Academy and Gyanpeeth, some way or the other. So I think what role do you think institutions can play? Sukrita, I would like to come to you first. What role, because I think in India, translation still is in a kind of a unregulated, unregulated activity, right?
Yes.
So in terms of institutional support, for example, Priyamvada mentioned the Tamil Nadu textbook project, right? So in terms of institutional support, what do we do? I mean, in terms of, I know Sahitya Academy does a lot of publishing, etc. But I mean, sorry to say, in terms of their publicity, fine, it is, good that Uma says that, let's just do our work and leave the other things. But I think other things also have to be taken care of, right?
Sure.
Support, institutional support has to be there in terms of not just publishers, but also, for example, reviewers and people talking about translations, etc. So in terms of institutional support, where do you think we are actually lacking?
You're talking about Telugu, but I am telling you that this is true of many languages of
Correct.
India, which get neglected, primarily because I think, of course, in many languages, a lot of translation is happening or not happening, but it all depends on who are the people who are promoting. Institution, after all, is built up of people and people from outside. I find that there are certain individuals who really are very successful in making projects, you know what I mean? And then apply and push for support. That's not adequately happening in some languages.
Correct.
The work is happening, but people are not, I hate to use the word, but pushy enough in terms of, getting it into an institution for support. Because I do notice, I mean, I haven't been very close to that set of people in Sahitya Academy, but I know that if I have applied in the past, I remember I applied for a grant for Chamba narratives, for instance. There was no problem in getting the grant, because it wasn't as if I was pushing, but I did make the project, right? And I did apply for it. And when you apply for it, they have to jolly well sit and talk about this. Should the project be given money or not? And it was, I won't say it was given because it's exotic, but after all, from Chambiali and that area, it was a collaborative project of translation, but it happened. So I have a feeling, and I'm also speaking as the editor of Indian literature, I am looking for material from Telugu. I'm getting Kannada, I'm getting Malayalam, if I'm looking at the South, for instance.
Correct.
But I'm not getting material from Telugu. I was actually contemplating writing to you people. Kindly please contribute, you have done so much, contribute to Indian literature. Because Indian literature now, the subscription has gone up tremendously. But the problem is that Telugu is, and somebody could ask me, why are you not publishing Telugu stories? How would I publish if I'm not getting the translation?
Yeah. I think it cuts both ways.
It cuts both ways.
Absolutely.
And I want to say this, that, in the case of, say, for instance, I want to talk about, say, translation, Sheela Tomy's translation, Valli. Now, the first thing that I noticed, and I think that tradition of translation, but at the same time, there is a certain kind of immediacy. It's reaching out. It's reaching out. I don't know if there are schools of translation in Malayalam, but why is Malayalam doing well in English? Right?
Yeah.
And even the original writing that is happening, I think there is somewhere this culture of translation also. And that culture of translation should teach us that, to the reader I'm talking about, it should teach the reader that you have to learn to accept the foreign, the alien. You have to learn to read a translated text as a translated text, which can seem like another original, of course, and only then you'll be gripped by it. But at the same time, and that's one reason why Valli appeals so much, or even Nala Supara does. You know why? Because as Madhu very appropriately said, there are so many words that she had to retain, but I'm sure and I noticed that when she uses those words, there is an ambience of understanding that is created around it. You understand the term, but the cultural contact is there, right? You immediately know, as I said, that there is Hindi in that English.
Yeah.
To me, that is a very important factor. If she had been very conscious about that, that I need to sanitize it into pure English, with the English person may not do, but here we have been, because it's his master's voice, whatever. Imperialistic tendencies are there. So that is why owning of that language, English language, needs to happen, which is happening to a large extent now. So translators need to be more courageous in having a go at making it a bilingual text. Like Arundhati Roy's book, God of Small Things did.
I think I will.
Rajrao could do it. Arundhati Roy could do it. Man Rashti could do it. If all those people, then translators, why not do it? In the same way.
I think that in a way finally brings us back to the first question that I posed to Sanjukta, about readability, and I think just like the names that you mentioned, whether it is Arundhati Roy or Salman Rushdie, they took the risks, and they also, for example, as you said, readers had to accept that such a different kind of reading experience is possible. I think that's where Sanjukta, your last word about, for example, how courageous or how much risk should a translator take? Because you talked about readability as your first priority. So where does that line, a translator has to be conscious of where it becomes unreadable by trying to be over experimental? You are on mute, Sanjukta.
So when we were thinking in terms of translation and readability, which I first mentioned, I just want to come to a bit of an anecdote of Mini Krishnan running home from school one day to tell her mother, after reading Kabliwala, which they read many times at home and in school, that did you know that Tagore was not a Malayali? So that is where a translation works. Yes, when it becomes absolutely a translation where there is this immersion of the reader into the text. And that is what we grew up with. When we read all those tomes from Tolstoy, we never asked what Russian is or whether it was whether there was fidelity or not. When we read the 100 Years of Solitude, did we even bother to think about how whether it was Spanish or whether there was fidelity? But because in India we know so many other languages, many of us are very good at other vernacular languages, some are not, but at least Indians have 2 or 3 languages. And therefore, I think if you are translating from a known vernacular language into another vernacular, then of course there are many similarities, especially again in terms of the Sanskritized languages. When we go to Hindi and then all the other associated languages, that is Assamese, Orissa, and then of course you can use so many words which are similar to each other. And that makes the task of the translator very easy. In fact, Girish Karnad had talked about it once. This is what enables the translator from one language to the other. But when you think of translating a Bengali text or even a Punjabi text into an English text, the syntax, the culture, the language, everything is different. And therefore, the translator, I feel, needs to be consciously not just bilingual, but bicultural.
Yeah.
Otherwise, to get the resonance of the target language will not come.
I
So
think
that is seamlessly you have to
Yeah.
move from
Correct.
the source language to the target
Yeah.
language.
I think
And that
that's
is the advantage of immersion in the text, the intimacy of the text, which we found in Madhu's writing, because Madhu could really sweep us into the very, I think, the emotional impact of the story.
Yeah.
It did not seem as if you were reading a translated text.
Correct. Yeah.
But Vijay, can I just put in
Yeah.
one word here?
Yeah.
I think that's why, my first response was, I hate to be on judgment on anyone on this, because how can we say Valli was not the same? If it was in Valli, how can we say that the Telugu stories didn't come across like that? This was our dilemma. And the true stories, my goodness, I mean, the truth of the true stories, the way it hits you, it is so wonderfully translated that you feel the truth of that story. It's experiential, it is charged. So how do you say this is better than that?
I know it's not a horse race, where only one horse can win. But unfortunately, all prizes have to be like that. Yeah,
but
I see that.
3 cheers to the award. We have to say that. Absolutely 3 cheers.
Yeah.
Yes, the shortlisted texts that came to us ultimately, all the 10, they were so brilliant. Sukrita and I found it very tough to zero in on just one.
There were about 85 submissions, and out of that 85, to come to the final.
From 18 languages.
Absolutely.
Remarkable exercise.
Yeah. So I see Kinara Murthy desperately trying to, wrap up this session. Kinara, it's over to you, and thank you very much, everyone. And we are going to take a few questions from the chat box that Kinara will read out. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, I know it is a big panel and it's not easy for to conduct the session, but yet I think we heard the views of everybody on the panel. That was quite a feat in itself. But the audience also deserves its due, so we'll just take a little bit more time and answer at least some of the questions. And if I have time, I'll squeeze in a question of mine too. Arun G says, when you say translation is a political act, does the ideological affiliation help for better translation, or does it affect the translation?
I think Jayasree can take that question.
So when I say translation is a political act, it is, of course, to a large extent about the ideology in the text that you're translating. In that sense, I think for me personally, and I should reiterate that I am not from academia, I am not from the translation discussion field. I worked for 20 years in mental health and human rights, and I also translate. So I am a very political individual who does political work. So for me to spend, and I take a whole long time, I take at least a year to translate a book because I take it slowly. So when you have to live with the book, allow those characters and those happenings into your head, you better like it. You better agree with, even with the bad characters. What I mean is, as a story world, you need to have some kind of affinity with it, at least for me. So for me, a political affinity with that world is important. And I think if I'm translating that, it probably makes it better. But I meant translation is a political act also in other ways. And that is in terms of, for example, one of the examples I can quickly give you is how to decolonize the English language. And this is, by bringing our own ways of playing with language, our own ways, bringing ways of writing English that sings to the tune of Malayalam, for instance, that in itself decolonizes language. So there are many other ways in which translation is political as well.
The next question is from Usha Raman. How does a translator deal with the shift in nuances of language in the period the original text is situated in, and the contemporary usage in the target language? Now, who shall you give the question to, Vijay?
Yeah, I mean, anybody can take, but I think maybe Priyamvada can try that.
Sure. Yeah, I think I kind of faced this with both Stories of the True as well as the book that I'm currently translating, which is a historical novel called Vellayane, which is White Elephant in English. And, I think the challenge there is for your language cannot sound archaic because you're writing for a contemporary reader. But at the same time, one has to be watchful that you're not using anything anachronistic. So especially in the historical novel, I do find myself checking at times to see if this is something that would have been used in a novel set in the late 1800s. So that is a delicate balance that one has to achieve. But I think for the most part, because you are translating for a contemporary audience, you don't want the characters to sound like they're speaking Victorian English. So, and that's how I've dealt with it.
This question from Surya Rao. In translation, one tries to carry the ethos of one culture to the readers from another culture. How challenging can this become? I think there are quite a few in this strain. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is something that Uma and Sridhar can take.
Well, every culture has its richness. And
maybe I'll add the second question also.
So to take...
there's one more question from Arun in the same same thing. He says that each language, at least as I know of Telugu, there are several dialects. How do you work on all these if you're translating? So it's a culture and dialect also, because the dialect changes with the culture too.
Yeah, Sridhar will start and then I will add. Yeah.
Yes, when you're dealing with texts which are written in specific dialects, there is a responsibility on the part of the translators to get it across to the English reader. And we feel that, especially when we do anthologies like the one that we did in this case, there are writers who from Telangana region who and also writers who write who are Muslims who are writing in Telugu, but the use of their Telugu is predominantly I mean, there are a lot of words which are from Urdu and Dakkani, for example, if they are writing from Telangana region. Now, there is a responsibility on the part of the translator to get this across. I like one of the things that Sukrita has said about the whole act of translation. The reader in English must get the feel of that language when even as it is being read in English. The question of readability in English, at least for the two of us, Uma and I, is not primary. The primary thing is to get the style of the writers across. If you are representing 25 writers in an anthology like this, the 25 writers cannot be presented in a uniform English style. They have to be different. And there is an onus on the part of the translators to get this across. If we did not do this, then we have not been successful. That's what I would say. Uma will
Yeah, I mean, culture, we talked about how to bring the richness of one culture to another culture which is rich. Each culture has its own individuality, and it's responsibility of the translator to bring this individuality into another culture, and there is an onus on the reader to understand the culture of another text. And we read American text, we read African, get into the culture of these texts. Similarly, when we bring certain cultural things, I mean, people have mentioned about, Madhu has mentioned about kinship terms and all that. That's been a thing that have been discussed for a very long time. It's not just that. It's the way in which people interact with each other. People live in a certain situation. All of these are very specific to specific instances. And I remember, just as a passing thing, I just want to say that there was one volume a long time ago when we had just got into translation, where a reviewer said that all the stories read so well, and they were from different languages from across the country. But they read so well that one did not know which state or which language that text was coming from. That understanding the language, understanding the ethos of that thing. But as a text, the whole text read very well. It was almost like a single language across all the things. So who's to blame? The translator, the editor, the publisher, or the reader who wants that kind of a text? It's a question that we need to answer.
Yeah, thank you. Probably I can squeeze in my question here. You did mention about Khadir Babu. The kind of, apart from the style, the kind of raw emotion he talks in a particular dialect, I don't think I can even translate it to another dialect in the same language. So how do you bring it out? Otherwise, it will become purely technical and clinical translation. It's very, very difficult. So how do you deal with such writers?
If we have brought it out, you should have been able to appreciate it. If it has not been brought out, the fault is ours. We have been trying, we tried to bring the way in which Khadir Babu, who comes from Nellore, who speaks a certain kind of language, who is also influenced by living in Hyderabad, who also is a Muslim,
a journalist.
He was a journalist, brings a certain kind of ethos into a language and the thing into that style. And we have tried to see whether we can bring that out. We don't know. It's for you readers to let us know whether we have brought it out or we have failed. We feel that we have tried our best to bring the differences of Khadir Babu as say opposed to Volga in this particular story, where she's writing in a more straightforward, standardized kind of a thing. We have tried to bring that out. Maybe we have succeeded, maybe we have failed. It's for you to decide.
Okay, there's one question from Amit Shankar Saha. Every translation is an interpretation at some level. In interpreting, how much remains of the author and how much the translators and how much for the reader?
I think this is something that Madhu can take, particularly because it deals with interpreting and
like we have been discussing, translation is also an act of politics. So I think in the translated text, the voice of the translator also surfaces. It's not just the original author. I think the translator has a role to play, because however much we try to be faithful, like Jayasree said, that I keep my ideology aside and I try to be the characters who are there, even if they are dark characters, they are negative characters, all that is fine. But still, I think the translator's voice somehow remains. She has, or he has an originality, because if the same text is translated by some other translator, I think the two texts will be different. So the translator has a role and interpretation and presentation, and it also depends on the reader. Now, who is reading? Maybe the same text, translated text, will not have the same impact on two readers. there are commonalities, but I have seen for my text itself that some readers have said that it is so gripping and they have been gripped by the emotion, they couldn't put the book down. Some have even finished it on a single night, but some have been so disturbed they have kept it aside. They have, no, this is too dark, or no, I don't like it. So it also depends on the reader. So author, translator, reader, it's all together like any other book. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, and I think this could go on and on because there are so many issues and we have barely touched the surface. But it's an important session because the world of literature just opens up exponentially when we have translations. And I think we are exposed to world culture sitting in our homes and to the different genres of literature. So thank you for translating. And like Sanjukta said, we are so blessed because we are at least versatile in 2-3 languages, and that itself is our USP. There have been some, like congratulations, somebody said, and they talked about some of the important points like users versus teachers of English. They liked that point. And then the fascinating discussion. Some praises that have come here, I thought I'll just share with you. This has been a wonderful session. Thanks to all the panelists. And writing in English that sings to the tune of Malayalam. Lovely. So this is another comment that has come. Apart from that, responding to what Sukrita said about Telugu literature, I think we've had a lot of translations earlier. In fact, I was exposed to a whole lot of translations from all over the world because there were so many translations available, whether it is Hindi literature or Bengali literature or Tamil literature or the ubiquitous Soviet Union literature that was coming in with so many things, and then of the American thing that Reader's Digest started to hold sessions where people could understand things better. So a whole lot of things had happened, and in fact there were a lot of authors in Telugu who tried to introduce other books, not by typically translating them, but trying to summarize them for people within the state. So the Telugu literature actually has come from a very rich legacy. I don't know where it stopped and why it stopped. In fact, it was one of the first languages which had a wonderful publisher called UNESCO, who had a monthly payment kind of a thing, where you build your own library, the home libraries. That was a movement where a lot of us read a lot of translations because of the number of books that were available through this route. So I hope that revolution comes again and we start reading a lot more, and the world opens to us and we read more and more. With that, I thank each and every one of you trying to put in diverse points of view despite the shortage of time and the number of panelists being more. And thank you, Vijay, for conducting it so well also. And we hope that we will see some of you at the Hyderabad Literary Festival, January 24th to 26th, 2025. And please don't forget, June 14th, again, we have one more session where an author will be speaking. It will be in conversation with another person, and that is on June 14th, 7 p.m.
Yeah, so with your permission, Kinnara, I just want to mention that since you mentioned 2025 HLF, from HLF 2025, the Muse India Translation Award, that session will be part of the annual festival of Hyderabad Literary Festival. And in 2025, the dates are 24th, 25th, 26th January 2025. And that year's award will be part of the festival. I just wanted to make that. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Very nice to meet
Thank
you
you,
all.
everyone.
Thank you.
Lovely meeting you. Lovely meeting
you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.